afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, June 6, 2024 Watertown City Plan Commission. Brandy, can you help with the roll call?
Yes. Spire.
Here.
Oletsky.
Here.
Dolly.
Here?
Hanson.
Here.
Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Brink.
Here.
And Kays, Ford, and Culhane are absent. We have a quorum with 6 members. It is the majority in the affirmative for a positive recommendation to the city council from action taken today.
So that would make the affirmative 4 minimum votes.
Yes, sorry about that.
Item 3 on the agenda is invitation for public comment participant submittal. If somebody'd like to sign up there at the table for speaking to the board on something that's not on the agenda. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor? Opposed? Agenda is approved. Moving on to item 5A on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the April 18th meeting. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. Moving on to item 6A on the regular agenda is commission consideration ordinance 24-07. I'll turn it over to Brandy.
All right, thank you, Blake. So this is a rezone request for a portion of Bourbon's Addition, which is located just south of Dunnick Incorporated, or we could say east of Hobby Lobby along 31st Street Southeast. So that portion of property is currently zoned I-1 light industrial, and there is an existing residential residence located there. And when this property was annexed, most likely, that house was existing, so it was brought in as legal nonconforming, and then was also parceled off from the existing parcel that was originally, oh, there you go. Oh, you're sharing. Okay, and then maybe if Randy mutes too. Sorry, guys. There you go. Perfect, thanks, Mitch. No, you're fine. Okay. So then, I'll get back here. All right, so the proposal is to rezone this from the I-1 to the C3 Highway Commercial District. That is a benefit because it does bring the property into conformance for the minimum lot size. I-1, because this property was subdivided without a plat, and another requirement would also be that it would be platted upon the rezone. But the existing property is 21,631 square feet. And in the I-1 district, you need 30,000 square feet, and in the C3, you need 20,000. So it brings it into conformance in that way, in that sense. And then also the property owner plans on removing the residence. And there's also a septic system and drain field for the sanitary services or sanitary facilities. And he plans on removing that, and then he would be required to do a sealed holding tank for a commercial business, which I believe will be, actually, I can't even speculate, like exactly. I believe it's gonna be kind of more like storage shop, like a storage shop. But that will be besides the point because we're not here for conditional use or anything at this point. But then obviously as well, 31st Street is not improved to city standards. So the applicant would sign a waiver of right to protest at this time, and if 31st Street were improved, would be required to participate in those costs for upgrading it at whatever time that would happen, hopefully sooner than later. But with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you, Brandy. In terms of our long-term development and redevelopment plan there, the C3 district is part of the strategy for that area.
Yes,
So this
good
is
point.
in line with our plan, right?
Yes, that's a good point, Blake.
This does have a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing at this time if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against.
You're only talking about this area or this whole?
Correct, just the smaller section of
Just the
that.
smaller, okay.
I did have a question on that. So as you mentioned, a replat would be required for the smaller portion of that lot when we rezone it. The rest of that lot, though, would not be replatted at the same time. It would require a replat if they were to come forward again with that, any portion of that lot and want to rezone at a different time?
Yes, yep, if they rezone, so that's the other thing too, is that there, there has been a scale house just constructed on that property. So it's always a fine line of when we're, as far as how that property is existing, and then, because right now it's just less this portion, but it is that entire piece. So it's, it makes sense when it's completely new development that they would replat and have that clean before progressing. But with Dunnick's property as a whole, so they still exist as, honestly, I don't know why we didn't have them replat that when they got their scale house permit, but that's always tough too. But like with this property has recently been conveyed. So to have it be a fresh plat without being just a portion of, obviously how it exists today, we couldn't plat it because the zoning is inappropriate.
Right.
So, or the lot size is inappropriate for the zoning district. So, those are just things that we kind of manage as far as when building permits are issued.
Are there any other triggering factors that could drive that parent parcel to replat, other than rezoning?
Building permits. But a lot of the times, if it's a completely new, because what we want to avoid is that people are creating nonconformities. So we want to encourage that people plat so that we can review what our city standards are. But we also cannot control, because they can convey whatever property they want, but they might not be, they might be defeating their purpose of having a buildable right and not even knowing it. So that's the benefit of platting, is that they're bringing it in for city to review to say, yes, assuring that this would have a buildable right. So if somebody is getting a new building permit, it is obviously conducive in certain scenarios, but we also get pushback from the county of when we make people replat existing platted lots. So it is, this was platted, it is Bervin's edition. But then they subdivided it on their own. So it's a fine line. Obviously, we would like to replat everything, but we've had pushback from that, like I said. And
Is some of the
ultimately,
consideration there whether the use is changing substantially as well, or if it's ancillary to the existing use?
yeah, and especially when there is, like this, a rezone request, or obviously an annexation, because then you have to have it be to the municipality of Watertown instead of in the section township range in Cottington County. So rezones and annexations are large triggers that we like to try to keep that standard of having that replat done, so that because you're bringing it into conformance now. Otherwise, it could not be platted previously. And that would be a problem if the property owner today would want it to remain as I-1, he would need to acquire about 9,000 more square feet. Even though this area is shown to be that commercial, it's along the 212 corridor.
Yeah. And then in terms of the parent parcel, there's no nonconformity in terms of, lot size, setbacks, those sort of things for the parent parcel?
No.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Brandy, is this in the city of Watertown, or is it in Cottington County?
It's within, it is
It's in-
annexed.
Okay.
The lot immediately to the south is still in the county, right?
Yep.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Brandy, is the owner of Lot 3 the same owner? I assume they're two different owners.
Yes. Yep, so the north owner is Dunnick, Incorporated.
Okay, and
And-
do we, so Lot 3, I mean, they're just chunking a little piece out of their property and selling it off, right?
It has been, so they subdivided this house, this existing house out, I'll zoom in here, quite a while ago. So this has always, now this isn't the current owner, this Koff Trust. It is it's Brian Brandreit's rental company here. It's 6B Rentals LLC that owns it now. So this house, I could look back if you guys are interested on how long it's existed there, but it's been,
That isn't where I'm going, my question. My question is, again, now when I'm kind of a straight line kind of girl. Why didn't we go all the way back to the property line, make a nice square chunk, instead of now we have a, odd-shaped parcel behind that for development? I'm just looking down the road, now we got this little tag down there that, what are you gonna do with it? And I know we have no way to control what people want to sell off and all this good jazz, but I guess that's just, I'm just bringing that to light, that kind of, if, do we rezone it straight through? I mean, or would that other owner would have to petition to change that, obviously? But that's where I kind of get into where we start piecemealing stuff together, and then we end up with these really strange conformed lots, and then, 20 years from now, the people are scratching their heads saying, well, why did they do that? I'm just, being weird.
so we legally can't rezone a property, like have two different zoning districts within one lot boundary. So we would have to wait if they wanted to subdivide differently so that so the zoning district was completely following the lot boundaries. The other thing, yeah, it does come down to frontage requirement and then minimum lot size requirement.
Because now that piece, if it goes straight across, is going to be landlocked. It's, what I'm saying? We leave that potential for a little parcel stuck back there that,
If they were to further subdivide it.
yeah, that somebody can't get to. I'm just, and again, I don't know how we ever prevent that. It's just me being weird.
No, and for sure that is why we encourage platting. That's why platting exists, so that they can, so a big piece when it's annexed and zoned, that we go through the subdivision process with the concept plan, prelim plan, plats, construction plans and then plats. But that way then we can see how an area lays out rather than bringing in portions and piecemealing, because for sure we want to see how everything is going to end up working together, and so that we have orderly development.
Brandy. So the other two properties that are not in city limits, I guess whatever, if and when they would become annexed into town, are either of those lots big enough to be an I-1, or would they more than likely be a C3?
More than likely a C3. They're big enough to be an I1, but the comp plan would show for it to be a C3.
Yeah.
Right along the highway.
And then with 31st, as we see what the future is for that, obviously it's on the radar of the public works director and engineer and city engineer, and just the city as a whole, with that being a direct connection to the new ice arena. And so we'll just see, how all of this area begins to develop. But I think that it's a benefit to have this property rezoned with the adjacency to the commercial zoning of C3 highway commercial, and then also that it's conforming and that we can get rid of a longstanding residential unit in this location that should be either commercial or industrial.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we expect more of the property in this area that's currently being used for industrial use to eventually migrate into a more commercial type usage anyway.
Yeah.
I do have the public hearing open if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. Is there anybody online? Nobody for the public hearing?
The 10 acres next to it.
Okay. Did you guys want to?
We're just like,
Sounds good.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing then.
I'll make a motion to approve this.
I'll second.
A motion and a second on the table. Any discussion from the board?
I always think it's good when we can take a non-conforming lot and make it conforming.
And we know all of that along there is going to be commercial use and stuff, so.
Yeah, certainly in line with the comprehensive land use plan for the development and redevelopment of the area. All right, we'll take a,
I wish we could get 31st built with it, but not, different topic.
Come on, maybe the DOT, come up with some grants or something.
Yeah.
Brandy, if you could take a roll call vote for us.
Yes, Spire,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes,
Hanson,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Brink.
Yes.
it's unanimous. That motion passes. We move on to item 6B on the regular agenda, which is a consideration for ordinance 24-08. Brandy, I'll turn it over to you again.
Okay, thank you, Blake. So, this is an ordinance amendment proposed via application. Obviously, as far as, we've just seen another one come forward recently in this fashion. So this is when the community member actually submits an application for an ordinance to be reviewed, so they pay for it and whatnot. So that's how it gets prioritized, because obviously we have all sorts of amendments that we want to bring forward. So just to kind of give you guys more background on how these are coming forward and why there might be a different topic that we've been discussing that you're wondering why that's put on the back burner. And obviously, all of the ordinance amendments have kind of been put on the back burner because we're just trying to figure out the recodification schedule. So sidebar there, just wanted to kind of give you guys more background that we've had two of these kind of back to back. So this is an ordinance amendment proposal to the Business Park District, which is chapter 2130. And Jim Owen was the applicant on this, and he had, there was a business proposal as far as utilizing an existing building within the BP Business Park District. And then, but obviously that needs to be looked at holistically for the entire district and respecting what the purpose of it, what of its existence is, and the fact that it is our visibility, or, you know, visitors' visibility, or actually anyone, the general public using I-29, that's what you see and your first impression of Watertown. And so that's when the purpose of this district was to have the, you know, kind of the business park aspect of not so much the industrial, not a lot of commercial, even like we have Terex there, obviously, but that's a great fit because that all around that business is incredible for Watertown. Not that every business isn't, but there's definitely the aesthetic standards that needs to be upheld here, which you'll see here for staff's proposal here, or just what we're bringing forward as for the Plan Commission to review and contemplate would be if, so a self-storage facility for interior access only as a permitted use, and then storage units by a conditional use. Now, obviously, we know that our community utilizes storage units heavily, but we've also been experiencing shipping containers being used. We don't have a separate definition for the shipping containers, which I'm also not opposed to creating because they're obviously gaining a lot of traction and are a more feasible use for somebody to allow for storage on their property and kind of have a business in and of itself there. So I think though with the shipping containers, there is the aesthetic concern that as a community, I think we would have. So that's where I'm not opposed to creating higher standards, but that's where at least if it's by conditional use, the board is reviewing it, if it is a proposal that comes forward. The other thing with the BP district, and I'll show you guys, So this is the district as a whole. I also want to point out to just read you guys the purpose of the BP district. So the goal of the business park zoning district is to provide a flexible site for the formation of coordinated mix of land uses, including offices, arts, and medical facilities, light manufacturing, and light commercial, which harmonize and complement each other, encourage more creative, higher quality urban development, provide high standards for site planning, architecture, and landscape design to meet the needs of the most discriminating establishments. So, and to kind of go into the history where the BP district was established in 2002. You can see as well that there are vacant lots here, and the large office use or office buildings are going obsolete just as a trend. Really after COVID with the opportunity for remote working, for the Premier Bank Card building and whatnot, you see a lot of those office type careers and job opportunities offer the remote office and whatnot. So we do there's the 7 vacant lots, or actually 8. Nope, 7. 7 vacant lots in this area. They're owned by the Redland Arts Center or the Watertown Development Company. But to keep in mind, and that is what I have printed in front of you all in your little booklets. These are the covenants, which also staff does not administer, but I figured since knowing that these exist and these were all platted under all of these lots in the BP district follow these covenants. And so they do have higher standard, which once again does not bound, or doesn't tie the city's hands in making ordinance amendments. However, I think it's worth acknowledging, being that it encompasses the entire district. So just areas to point out, if you look at page 5J, and I'll pull it up on the big screen here too. So there's the building material regulations. So for the most part, it has the higher standard of the types of aesthetics that these buildings need to have, which would cause an issue in and of itself for the shipping containers. And so then when it touches on the metal, it says metal siding may be used only with specific written approval of the declarant, which is WDC, and only in combination with one of the above materials, and such approval will be granted only upon consideration of the total plan, the other material to be used, and the total visual impact of the facility. Specific written approval for this type of roofing material to be used upon any structure must be obtained from the declarant. So they have quite extensive requirements that has run with the land. And so there would be that additional step, even if storage units were allowed by conditional use by the city. They would still need to make sure that these covenants were being met, or they were following the out of the variance through their process and their covenants. So typically, I would never bring covenants up because it is something above and beyond cities administering. But just the fact that it encompasses the entire district that we're talking about, I figured it was worth noting some of these things. The only other thing here I'll point out is for the on page 8 for the regulation of uses. So they have their list of permitted uses, which are for the most part consistent with what the city ordinance is. But then they also have prohibited uses, which they do not prohibit storage units. So that's a good thing for our contemplation, that we're not creating an issue of them having to amend their covenants, because if it were completely prohibited, we should do this process the other way, most likely. So with all of that information, I will stand by for questions.
In terms of enforcement of these covenants, that would be a civil matter?
Yes.
We do have a public hearing today, so I'll open the public hearing at this time. If anybody's here to speak on behalf or against.
You want to say something?
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Owen. I represent Kermar LLC. The owners of the building you might remember is the former Verifications Building. That's currently leased to Worth Electronic, and they'll be in that building through March 31st of 2026, which is the planned schedule of completion of the new building they're building on their existing property out by the airport. So right now, it's going to continue in its use as office. We have a prospective buyer for the property that wants to convert it, the interior of the building, to climate-controlled storage and office rental. There are some offices that would be kept intact for rental, and then probably a cafeteria or luncheon area, and then the rest would be cubicles inside the building for climate-controlled storage. And that leaves quite a bit of land to the west of the building for parking. And climate-controlled storage is more or less the type of business that doesn't have a regular customer stream like a shopping center that needs huge amount of parking. So we estimate, the buyer estimates, that only part of the parking will be needed to service customers of the interior storage area. So the rest of the parking would be, he would like to use for exterior storage in self-contained metal prefabricated buildings. You see these around town a lot of time on the former railroad right-of-way that was sold off to various adjoining property owners. An example would be just north of First Avenue Southeast as you go from First Avenue north toward the vocational school. And there are quite a few storage units to the west of 11th Street that typify what the proposed buyer would eventually like to use in that extra parking area. But the main thing is to seek approval for conversion of the interior of the building to climate-controlled storage. And I don't think this meeting necessarily deals with the exterior. He doesn't even know for sure now what his plans are for it, but I think it's natural to assume that he would want to convert some of that extra parking to exterior storage. And, you know, that can be easily shielded from public view with fencing and different kinds of natural barriers. So it isn't the container storage unit concept that you see around town in some places, like along Highway 20 by the mobile home court. So that's our proposal, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Brandy, I have a question for you. Just for our process. So normally, like, let's say there's a rezone, we send out adjacent letters to 250 feet away from that property that's getting rezoned. But an ordinance amendment, we don't send out any adjacent landowner letters, which makes sense because a lot of times an ordinance affects the whole town. In this case, it's the business park that we're amending. Do we have any other business park zoned other than this area?
No. And I see where you're going with that, Jeff, but and the reason why I did not send it to the people in this area is because it opens the can of worms of notification. So this follows statute.
Right. And I wouldn't expect you to notify them, without direction from us first, because that, like you said, it would just open up a can of worms. But in my thought, this just does feel different. I mean, if we were changing the R1 setback from 9 feet to 8 feet, there's no way we would want to notify everyone in town. But I mean, this is literally just a handful of businesses, and it is the gateway of Watertown. I just wonder if this almost shouldn't be at least giving them the opportunity to think about it or get their opinions or thoughts, and you know, table to hear from them, or and send out something. I don't know if anyone else on the board feels the
I
same
would
way.
concur with that, Jeff. I also, what about the development company? Because you said they're the keeper of the company. And I would like to hear their thoughts on it as well.
That was gonna be my question is, yeah, I don't see the representatives from Watertown Development Company present tonight, but they do control the majority of that land out there, right?
Yeah, and that's where this was, we did not specifically contact Chris Clifton with the WDC. And that was a little bit because of not realizing that the covenants existed, because we don't typically administer covenants. But I thought that I wanted to share the information though, because it does exist over the entire district. So I see Jeff's point of this being unique because this is a small district. There's 7 lots that are left for development. And I did contemplate it, but then I just wanted to stay consistent.
No, and I think you did it correctly. I don't think we wanted to do that without direction of the board. And I do think that if our action was to table this, I don't think anyone's out anything. I mean, they're looking at a possible use in 2026, it sounds like. So I mean, if this took another month of, or not even a month, but or even another month of consideration, it doesn't feel like it's pushing back a timeline that's critical. So my thought would be, on a situation like this, would be to direct city to maybe at least send out adjacent landowner letters to people in this district, and then, see if we hear back, yes, no, or otherwise. I mean, they might not care, they might care strongly for or against.
I'd love to hear from the WDC as well, because they have been pushing for years to try to get more employers to build out here, to get more businesses to Watertown. And it's been a challenge to a significant extent. And as you said, Brandy, a lot of the shift with online working, remote working, reducing office space might be a driver to change the way that we look at the business park district as a whole. And I don't think I want to just kind of like piecemeal and take this stuff without having that larger discussion.
That's fair. And that is very, very good points. And that's just the thing where we can get with WDC, we can get the Redland Arts Center group in the room too, and see if actually they just want to look at how, like, they want to just look at the district as a whole. And, they have their covenants and they have the aesthetic requirements. So that is always going to uphold the aesthetics that they're looking for. But yes, I think that could be a good discussion. And as far as, we're just processing an application when they hit a deadline, trying to get there, we want to keep it moving for the applicant as well. But that's why we bring it to the board, and respect all of your thoughts and considerations. And Jim, is that, as far as timeline, does that put a strain? Hopefully we can keep this going where we can look at the next meeting or the July 2nd meeting.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to push this off too far. We can get people, lined up and let them know to come and represent themselves and their interest at the meeting. But yeah, I would like to certainly talk to some additional people before we take action on it. One additional comment though, Brandy, in terms of, should we take action on this request? Right now, it looks like both of those uses are combined on the request. It seems like, I don't know, at least from my perspective, I would like to look at those things separately. Outdoor storage versus indoor storage.
Well, and with the ordinance amendment though, Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt, but we have the ability to modify it more than we would, we could.
Correct.
We could approve one, not the other, or both, or neither.
Yeah.
We have the prerogative, we could take it as separate actions too from the board, but just writing it up, separately and distinctly and make sure that we fully understand the difference between the storage facilities as well. I'm not sure if we have both fully defined in the definitions.
Nope.
But in order for us to take action, I think we need to have a definition for each of those uses as well.
Yes, and we have storage units, and that's where the self-storage facility, we can put a definition with that. And then if you guys want, now this kind of opens it up further of if we start doing things with the shipping containers, as Mr. Owen described, I don't think that, it sounds like it would be something, a modified version like that, that wouldn't be shipping containers. But I think it's something that, and a lot of the time, storage units are a conditional use anyway. So then the board is still getting the opportunity to review that and make sure the aesthetics are there, make conditions on it. But yes, I can bring that forward with the definition. And the only reason why I'm saying the July 2nd, so we'll have another plan commission meeting on June 20th. However, I wouldn't make notice requirements.
Yeah.
So that's why we'd have to push it to July 2nd.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, just a comment along that. I will go on the record stating that I would not approve outdoor storage of any sort. You do drive over, you see into the city over that. Inside the building, you have no idea what's going on inside, but the outside storage would be a showstopper for me. That is our gateway. I mean, that was reason that was put in place was to protect us. And so I would just say that that's where my leniency would go.
Yes, and
Yeah, I'm sure you're
thank
not
you.
alone on that.
Thank you, Rhonda. And that is still that is prohibited. So it's in the district aside from the uses. It's further down here where we do have the higher standard requirements where the no outdoor storage will be permitted. A conditional use may be granted if storage is appropriate and is located behind visual barrier screening. So they can't unless a conditional use would be granted.
But
So-
that's what I'm saying. I don't think there's any screening that could go up because the interstate is higher than that. So you can see right
Yeah.
into it. So there's no screening that can be high enough to disguise that, in
You
my
want me to-
opinion, my humble opinion.
should I bring that forward as striking that? Or should we just leave that and not get too into the weeds because of the applicants? Because the specific request of the applicant to review storage units use, not outdoor storage at all. It's just for the use of a storage unit or an indoor storage facility.
In my opinion, again, I think that the developer themselves are probably going to be on that same page, that the indoor, again, you don't know what's going on inside, but the outside would just, I mean, you got Terry Redland and then you got storage units next to it? No. It just, that's black and white. I mean, that's just not going to work.
Just to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here, though, because we did build a giant new factory out there and introduced significant heavy industry to the area, which does have outdoor storage. So I would certainly like to hear from Watertown Development Company in terms of the thought process and logic that went into that decision and how that plays out with the rest of the BP district.
True, but it is a business park, it's an industrial park, so I
Absolutely.
expect to see your trucks there from Terex.
Yep.
I just don't expect to see shipping containers holding personal
But
property.
it is a change in the vision from what was originally laid out for the BP. Okay, so I will need a
Yeah.
motion from the board.
Yeah, will you close the public hearing and
Yeah, anybody else to speak on behalf? Was there anybody online on Teams?
No.
Any last comments, Mr. Owen?
No, I don't believe so. We spend a lot of time the winter in Sarasota, Florida, and anymore you find it hard to drive more than a mile on any of the major streets without going by one or more large 3- or 4-story buildings that look like an office building at first, but they're interior climate-controlled storage. And of course, they've got a different climate issue down there, very humid and hot and so forth. But it's a very, very popular form of accommodating our lifestyles. And so notwithstanding the comments about the outside storage, which I understand, I think the inside climate-controlled storage is a good idea. There's one facility now that I know of in Watertown, I think it's got 7 rooms. And they're full and in high demand, and they did a very nice job in that conversion. But I think it's a need that's developing with our lifestyles today. And so I would thank you all for your consideration and hope that if you want to separate the inside from the outside, we are under certain time constraints with the purchase process. And you can imagine that entails financing and a lot of related functions that need definite timelines. And so if it's possible, if we could get approval for the building use itself inside the building, we could get approval on the amendment for the ordinances for that much, and separate the outside storage. And I agree, I think WDC would definitely need to be part of the conversation. But that would be very helpful from the standpoint of sticking to our schedule for the purchase agreement deadlines. So.
Yeah, I understand the current constraints that you have on time here. I think certainly taking them as separate actions is something that we'd want to do regardless. I think my hesitation on the inside self-storage is not necessarily the use, but do we have it properly defined to know what we're approving? And without it in the definitions or within the proposal, I think that's a little bit of a gray area. Brandy, have we approved other indoor self-storage facilities under existing definition? How have we approached those?
So we had one recently, I'd say, and recently, probably 2 years ago now, but, oops, sorry. And we just went with storage units. And then because it was indoor, they were using the existing building, just because the lack of definition. And so on this one too, this was through, and that's what we've done previously when we've had that come forward for the request for the indoor climate control storage units. And so then, but through internal discussion, we wanted to make that more clear of that instead of just saying storage units, carte blanche, and that kind of leaving the door open to, are we going to have a bunch of garage doors, or are we going to have shipping containers? We actually wanted to get more clear with this proposal, knowing that there wasn't a definition for it, because there's not a definition for every use. And we thought that this way too, of self-storage facility, interior access only, we thought it was self-explanatory. So
What I just want to avoid is if we approved it, as storage facility or storage units, and then they could come in and put in standard, storage units with an exterior garage door, a whole bunch of bays down the line. And that's the thing I think that is causing a lot of hesitation, both that and shipping container style versus truly an office building look like you see in many communities. I'd certainly love to see too, from your standpoint, looking at other communities and how they've defined the standards, because this is a very common use that's become popularized in a lot of cities. It feels like we're maybe putting the cart before the horse by not having it fully defined when we're talking about approving these.
And I did research when preparing this, and this was, so self-storage facility is what they use for those interior storage, kind of a revitalization of the office building, of allowing, just coming up with a use for these large buildings that are kind of going obsolete for the use of offices.
In terms of putting it in ordinance, your stance is you think it would be sufficient enough to have it called out in the uses section as self-storage facility, indoor access only, without the need to further define it in the definitions section?
I do.
And we know that that could not be construed as any other type of storage unit that would be typically
And-
seen around town.
And if you got the thing though, if we're going to table it, I'm more than willing to put it in the definitions. Because ultimately, I think that what we also could do, and I don't know what the timelines are, because I do think that it's important that we get the people, the Redland Arts Center people, the WDC, knowing now with this discussion, because otherwise I did not want to just take that upon myself to notice them, because then that's doing something atypical than I usually would do for an ordinance amendment. So I was just trying to be consistent. So by all means, I can further clarify this. And then, like I said, depending on, so we won't make the June 20th, but perhaps we can look and see, we have the July 2nd, which is a Tuesday. But maybe it would work better for us to push that meeting up and have it on a Thursday for everyone's schedule with the 4th kind of too. That we could look at doing something like that. But I could coordinate that with you all and try to see, because then, we're still delaying it. And, there can be, but I do think it'll be important to get all those people in the room, and then I can
Yeah.
further define this, that.
It's an important part of town, and ordinance changes, especially in this district, is something that I don't think we should be too hasty about, and I certainly want to get additional input. I don't foresee an issue with this specific use, but I also don't want to act hastily on an ordinance change.
Yeah, and I feel like if we're saying we want to have that conversation with them, I don't think we should approve half of it right now and then say, yeah, well, we didn't feel you were needed for this part. That just feels backhanded.
Let's just try to make sure that we get the meeting lined up as soon as possible, and if that does mean that, we could potentially have a different scheduling session, I'm certainly willing to do that. You can reach out to the board. I think the board's been pretty willing to accommodate those types of requests.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be because now we have a special meeting on Monday, and so I don't want to, continue this to be a trend, because obviously everybody has schedules and timelines, but actually it might work out better. But I'll reach out and we'll do that on the back end and see if we couldn't almost turn this around faster with still meeting our public notice requirements. And definitely appreciate you guys' flexibility and input on this matter, because this is why we bring these requests to you all. So it's our entire community, and your input is very much valued.
The one thing that I want to make sure is like this office that you're going to, would want to change, that the outside still looks the same.
There will be no changes to the outside of the building. Now, the windows will stay the same, the outside walls are the same. That will not change. There'll certainly be some signage, and that type of thing, but that's all governed by other codes anyway, so, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Owen. I appreciate your time today and bringing this before us.
Thank you, yeah. Well, I really appreciate your consideration and your guidance in the matter, and we'll look forward to your decision on when we might reconvene and continue.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
I'll
you
close the
very
public
much.
hearing at this time.
I'll make a motion to table this item until the other landowners of the business park and the Watertown Development Company can be properly notified for a future meeting.
I'll second that.
Do we have to provide a time frame no later than July 2nd, or?
We have the option to do that, but we don't have to. So I'm just gonna leave it open for whenever they can.
For
make it
Brandy to coordinate that? Okay. And second that?
Yes, I did.
All right, any additional comments on that motion there? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote on that.
Get it done right. All right. Brink.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Spire.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes, so that will be tabled until you can reschedule the meeting with the appropriate notification of the adjacent landowners and the WDC.
Sounds good. And yeah, and the notices.
Open public comments, nobody signed up to speak. We'll move on to new business.
Just a reminder that we will have our special meeting on Monday at noon, and we have ordered subs. So we'll provide lunch for this, for the inconvenience of an extra meeting.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Brandy. Any old business from the board or from staff?
No,
Any reason for executive session?
no.
All right, I will adjourn us. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.